Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a story that taps into one of our most primal childhood fears, the unsettling quiet of an old house. This one is about family, tradition, and the terrifying realization that some places are better left unexplored. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into a game of hide and seek that went horribly wrong. There are certain places that just feel off. You know the feeling. The silence is too heavy. The shadows are too long. For a young woman named Emma, her grandparents' farmhouse was exactly that kind of place. It was old, isolated, and quiet in a way that felt wrong, as if the very walls were holding their breath, listening. Every single summer, her family would pack up and head to the countryside for a weekend retreat at the old house. And every single summer, Emma would dread the nights, trying to sleep through the symphony of creaks, groans, and whispers that seemed to come alive after midnight. This year, however, was a little different. Her younger cousin, Ben, had come along for the trip. Ben was the polar opposite of Emma. He was restless, energetic, and had an insatiable curiosity for exploring every nook and cranny. One evening, after the sun had set and the adults decided to go out for a while, leaving the two of them alone, Ben turned to Emma with a mischievous grin. "Let's play hide and seek," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the big living room, "like we used to." Emma, feeling too old for such games, rolled her eyes but eventually gave in. After all, what else was there to do? The farmhouse was a perfect, if slightly unnerving, playground for the game. It was huge and dimly lit, filled with an endless number of potential hiding spots, dark closets, dusty storage rooms, and even the old, dreaded basement that always smelled of damp earth and decay. Emma volunteered to be the seeker. She closed her eyes, leaned against the living room wall, and began to count. She could hear Ben's footsteps hurrying across the old wooden floorboards, the sound growing fainter and fainter until it disappeared completely. The house fell into its familiar, watchful silence. 48, Emma called out, her voice feeling small in the vast quiet. "Ready or not, here I come." She opened her eyes. The house was still, absolutely silent. She started her search in the kitchen, peering behind the pantry door and under the table. Nothing. She moved down the long hallway, checking behind the heavy curtains. Still nothing. Ben was good at this. She made her way upstairs, the old steps groaning under her weight. She checked the guest rooms, one by one, her heart starting to beat a little faster. They were empty, the beds neatly made, looking like they hadn't been touched in years. She was about to head for the attic, a place she truly despised, when she heard it. A faint noise from below. It was a soft thump, barely audible, but it was definitely coming from the basement. A shiver went down her spine. The basement door, which was always kept shut, was now slightly ajar. A sliver of pale, flickering light escaped from the crack, casting a weak glow on the hallway floor. "Ben," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. No answer, just the oppressive silence of the house. Against her better judgment, she pushed the door open and started down the steep, narrow stairs. Each step creaked and groaned as if protesting her descent. The air grew colder, thicker, filled with that familiar, musty smell of old wood and damp concrete. At the bottom of the stairs, a single bare bulb swung gently from a wire, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched across the floor like grasping fingers. The basement looked just as she remembered, each rows of dusty shelves lined with jars of canned food, old, forgotten tools hanging on the walls, and a broken-down washing machine sitting in the corner like a metal corpse. But something felt profoundly different tonight. Something felt wrong. Then, she saw it. A flicker of movement in the far corner of the room. A shadow had shifted behind one of the thick wooden support beams that held up the house. A wave of relief washed over her, quickly followed by a triumphant smile. "Found you," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. She started walking closer, her footsteps quiet on the concrete floor. The shadow didn't move. It didn't make a sound. "All right, Ben, game's over," she said, a little louder this time. Still nothing. She crept closer to the beam, her curiosity now mixed with a growing sense of unease. She crouched down to look behind it, ready to see her cousin's smiling face. And then, her blood ran cold. It wasn't Ben crouched in the darkness. It was a man. He was shockingly thin, his skin a sickly pale color. He was wearing a dark, tattered jacket that looked like it was caked with dirt and grime. But it was his eyes that made her freeze. In the dim, swinging light, they seemed to glow with a faint, unnatural luminescence. And he smiled at her. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a wide, predatory grin, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment, waiting for her to find him. A scream tore from Emma's throat, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. The man moved with a speed that was utterly inhuman, unfolding from his crouched position. She didn't wait to see more. She scrambled backward, stumbling over her own feet, and turned, running for the stairs. She flew up the steps, her lungs burning, and slammed the heavy basement door shut behind her, fumbling with the latch. "Ben," she screamed, her voice cracking with panic. He came running in from the living room, his face a mask of confusion. "What is it? What happened?" he asked, seeing the sheer terror on her face. She could barely get the words out, gasping for breath. Someone's down there." The color drained from Ben's face. "That's not possible. Emma, I wasn't in the basement. I was hiding in the woodshed out back. I heard you yelling from all the way out there." The realization hit them both at the same time. They didn't hesitate. They burst out the back door and ran, not stopping until they were far away from the house, fumbling with their phone to call their grandfather. He arrived just minutes later, his face grim, carrying a heavy flashlight and an old shotgun. He listened to Emma's frantic story before heading straight for the basement door. Emma and Ben waited outside, huddled together, listening to the silence. When their grandfather re-emerged from the house, he looked pale and deeply shaken. He told them the basement was empty. There were no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there at all. It was exactly as it always was. He walked over to Emma, his expression serious. You said you saw him behind the beam," he asked quietly. Emma, still trembling, could only nod. Her grandfather sighed heavily and rubbed his forehead, looking older than she had ever seen him. "When I was a boy," he began, his voice low and strained, "my father bricked up a small, hidden room right behind that beam. He said a drifter, a squatter, had been living down there without our knowledge. They tried to catch him, but he just vanished. They never could find him after he ran off." Emma didn't sleep a wink that night. She lay in her bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the old house made her jump, and through the floorboards, she could swear she heard it, the faint, rhythmic creak of footsteps, pacing back and forth in the darkness below. The next morning, the family packed up in a hurry, the cheerful weekend retreat cut short. Ben, looking just as pale as Emma felt, remembered he'd left his backpack in the basement. He hesitated, but then quickly ran down to grab it. When he came back up the stairs a moment later, his face was as white as a sheet. "Emma," he whispered, his voice shaking. He held up his hand. This was sitting on the steps. In his palm was an old, tarnished brass key, tied to a frayed piece of string. Emma leaned closer. Scratched crudely into the flat surface of the key were 4 terrifying words. "Your turn to hide. Thank you so much for listening." What do you think happened to the drifter? And what would you do if you found that key? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next descent into the darkness. Stay safe out there. And until next time, sleep well. The summer nights in Willow Creek always smelled of pine and smoke from backyard fires. The woods, they stretched endlessly behind our row of houses, thick and tangled. It was the kind of place kids were warned not to wander after dark. But you know how it is. Warnings, especially for a group of teenagers, are more like invitations. That Friday night, it was me, my sister Laura, and our friends Sam and Leo. We were sitting around a dying campfire behind my house. Fireflies blinked lazily in the humid air, like tiny, floating embers. Sam, ever the instigator, tossed a twig into the flames. "Let's play hide and seek," he said, a grin already spreading across his face. In the woods, Laura frowned immediately. It's pitch dark. That's not funny. But Leo, he was already on board. That's what makes it fun, he shot back. They went back and forth for a few minutes, the classic debate of thrill versus caution. But eventually, the thrill won. We all agreed. The rules were simple. No going past the old fence line that marked the deep woods. No flashlights. And if you heard someone whistle twice, the round was over, and everyone had to come back to the fire. Sam, of course, volunteered to be the seeker first. He turned to face the flickering flames and started counting, his voice echoing eerily into the trees. 1.2. I grabbed Laura's wrist. Come on, we'll hide together. We ran, our sneakers crunching on the carpet of dry leaves. The deeper we went, the darker it became, until even the faint, comforting glow of the campfire was completely swallowed by the night. We found a perfect spot, a thick cluster of bushes near a huge fallen tree, and crouched down behind it. He'll never find us here, I whispered, feeling a surge of confidence. We waited. The woods had its own soundtrack, the constant chirp of crickets, the soft whisper of wind through the leaves, and somewhere far off, the low, mournful hoot of an owl. It was peaceful. Almost then, a new sound joined the chorus. Footsteps. But they were wrong. Slow, uneven, dragging through the undergrowth. Sam's coming, Laura breathed, her voice tight. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't Sam. His steps were quick, light. These were heavy, labored, like something tired or hurt. I held my breath, every muscle tense. The steps stopped, just a few feet away from our hiding spot. Peeking through the leaves, I could see a shadow between the trees. It was tall, impossibly still. Way too tall to be Sam or Leo. Laura's grip on my arm was like a vice. Who's that? She whispered, her voice trembling. Before I could even think of an answer, the figure tilted its head slightly, as if it was listening, trying to pinpoint our location. Then, as slowly as it appeared, it turned and walked deeper into the woods, its form melting back into the impenetrable darkness. We stayed frozen for what felt like an eternity, until finally, the two-whistle signal cut through the night. We scrambled back to the fire, our hearts still hammering. Sam and Leo were already there, and they both looked just as uneasy as we felt. You guys heard that too, right? Leo asked, his usual bravado gone. Heard what? Laura asked, trying to sound casual. Sam just poked at the fire with a long stick, not meeting our eyes. The footsteps, he said quietly. When I was counting, someone walked right behind me. I thought it was one of you trying to mess with me. But when I turned around, no one was there. A heavy silence fell over our group. The crackle of the fire was the only sound. Maybe it was just an animal, I offered, but the words sounded weak and hollow even to me. None of us believed it. The woods felt different now, watchful. Still, driven by some strange mix of fear and stubbornness, we decided to play one more round. This time, I was the seeker. I turned my back to the woods, faced the fire, and began to count. 48. Ready or not, here I come. When I turned around, the woods had swallowed all sound. It was completely silent. I started moving slowly, my senses on high alert. Come out, wherever you are, I called out, but my voice echoed strangely, sounding small and foreign between the ancient trees. That's when I heard it again, that same unmistakable sound, the slow, dragging footsteps, this time right behind me. Okay, very funny, I said, spinning around, expecting to see Leo or Sam with a smug look on their face. But there was nothing, just the dark, empty woods. I took a few steps toward where the sound had come from, my frustration mixing with a growing dread. And that's when I saw it. Ahead, through a gap in the trees, a flicker of something pale, slipping between the trunks. Against all my better judgment, I followed. The air grew colder with every step, a damp chill that had nothing to do with the night. The woods opened up into a small, circular clearing I'd never seen before. In the center stood a dilapidated old hunting shack. Its wood rotted and gray, the door hanging half open on a single rusty hinge. The dragging sound seemed to be coming from inside. My heart was a drum against my ribs as I stepped closer. The door let out a long, low creak as I pushed it open. Inside was just darkness and something else. A row of small, muddy handprints were smeared across the far wall, and beneath them, a single, chilling phrase had been scratched into the wood. Asterisk, found you. Asterisk, I stumbled back, tripping over the threshold and landing hard on the damp ground. And from the woods behind me, I heard the faint sound of someone whistling. Twice, the game over signal. I scrambled to my feet and spun around. The clearing was empty. The woods were silent. When I finally crashed back through the trees to the campfire, everyone was already packing up, their faces pale in the firelight. "We heard you whistle," Sam said, his voice strained. "We thought you ended it." I just shook my head, unable to form the words. "That wasn't me." We didn't play again after that. We didn't even talk about it. We just packed up in silence and went home. Later that night, as I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself it was all just our imaginations, I heard it. Soft footsteps, right outside my bedroom window. Slow, dragging, followed by a whistle. Twice. Thanks for listening to this chilling tale. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the shadows. Stay safe out there. When Mia and Tyler moved into their new apartment, they thought they'd lucked out. The rent was cheap, the building was quiet, and it was close to work. The only catch was that it was old, really old. The kind of place where pipes groaned at night and doors never stayed shut all the way. It had a certain vintage charm, they told themselves, ignoring the faint, musty smell that clung to the air like a ghost. They moved in on a Friday. By Sunday evening, most of their boxes were unpacked. The apartment was starting to feel like a home. To celebrate, Tyler grabbed 2 beers from the fridge and grinned at Mia. "Let's play a game," he said, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Loser cleans the kitchen." Mia laughed, leaning against a half-unpacked box. "A game? What are we, 12? Come on," he insisted. "Hide and seek. Lights off. Just one round." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't resist his playful energy. She agreed. Tyler stood in the living room, facing the wall, and started counting. 1, 2, 3. Mia ran down the narrow, dimly lit hallway, her bare feet silent on the old wooden floors. She tried not to make a sound. Most of the rooms were still chaotic, filled with piles of boxes and furniture shoved against the walls, creating a maze of shadows. She ducked into the bedroom and slid into the tight space between a heavy oak wardrobe and the wall. The gap was just wide enough. Through the crack, she could see a sliver of the door and the hallway beyond. It was the perfect hiding spot. Tyler's voice echoed faintly from the other end of the apartment. "Ready or not, here I come." The apartment fell quiet, the silence broken only by the faint, electric hum of the refrigerator. Mia covered her mouth to stifle a giggle when she heard him open the bathroom door, then the hall closet. His footsteps grew closer, approaching the bedroom. She watched the shadow of his legs appear under the door. He was right outside. Then, something strange happened. A second set of footsteps joined his, slower, heavier, deliberate. The first pair of Tyler's stopped just outside the door, and so did the other. Mia frowned, her amusement fading into confusion. Maybe it was the upstairs neighbors, she thought. The floors were probably thin. She waited for the sound to fade, but it didn't. Instead, she could see a shadow at the bottom of the door, a single, unmoving silhouette of someone standing there. "To still, Tyler," she whispered, her voice barely audible. No answer. The doorknob began to turn, agonizingly, slowly. The door creaked open just an inch, casting a long, thin shadow into the dark room. Mia's pulse quickened, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Then, nothing. The door stayed half open, a silent invitation. She waited another minute, her ears straining for any sound, but there was only silence. Finally, she couldn't take the suspense anymore. She stepped out from behind the wardrobe. "Okay, I give up," she called out, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle and fake. "You win." The silence that answered her was heavy, unnerving. She walked through the bedroom and into the living room. "No, Tyler." The kitchen light flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows on the walls. She called his name again, louder this time, a tremor of real fear in her voice. Tyler. Suddenly, she heard a muffled sound from behind the couch. Boo! She jumped, letting out a small shriek, then grabbed a pillow and hit him with it. Not funny. Tyler just grinned, his face triumphant. You scare easy. She tried to shake off the unease, but something in her gut twisted. Did you hear someone else walking around? She asked quietly, her eyes searching his. He frowned, his smile vanishing. What do you mean? She told him everything, the second set of footsteps, the door opening on its own, the still shadow that lingered outside. He listened, but then he laughed it off. It's an old building, Mia. Thin walls, creaky floors. You're just letting your imagination get the best of you. He pulled her into a hug. But his reassurance did little to calm the fear that had taken root in her heart. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside the window made her tense up, her body rigid in the dark. Around 2 a.m., she heard it, a soft, dragging scrape, like something being moved just outside their bedroom door. She sat bolt upright, her heart pounding against her ribs. She shook Tyler awake. Someone's out there, she whispered, her voice trembling. He got up, half asleep and grumbling, and stumbled to the door. He pulled it open. The hallway was empty, bathed in the pale, ghostly light from the living room window. He shrugged. See? Nothing. He closed the door and crawled back into bed, falling asleep almost instantly. But Mia lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening. The next morning, Mia went to the kitchen to make coffee and froze. There, on the newly polished wooden floor, were muddy footprints. They trailed from the front door, across the living room, and stopped. They stopped right in front of the couch, the exact spot where Tyler had hidden during their game. Tyler, look at this, she called, her voice strained. He came over, his expression shifting from sleepy confusion to alarm. Did you go outside last night? She asked. No. Did you? They both knew the answer. They followed the prints together, an unspoken dread hanging between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The mundane reality of their new life had been shattered. That evening, the tension in the apartment was thick enough to cut with a knife. While Tyler was in the shower, the sound of running water, a feeble attempt to restore normalcy, Mia decided to distract herself by unpacking another box. It was full of old coats and jackets. She opened the hallway closet to hang them up. As she pushed aside some of the coats already hanging there, her fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. It was a small, folded scrap of paper, wedged deep inside the pocket of an old trench coat left by a previous tenant. Her heart stopped. With trembling hands, she unfolded it. On it, written in jagged, frantic handwriting, were 5 simple words. Thanks for letting me play. She backed away slowly, her eyes wide with terror, the piece of paper falling from her numb fingers. The bathroom faucet shut off abruptly. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic dripping of water. Tyler, she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the suffocating silence. From inside the bathroom, she heard his voice, calm and casual. Yeah. And then, a second later, from right behind her from inside the closet she had just opened, came the exact same voice, whispering the exact same word. Yeah.